I had a wonderful childhood, very wonderful. My parents were both wonderful, and my father worked for Wonder Bread all his life, and so I was raised on Wonder Bread. I said I was a wonder child, and we always used to go out together. And I only had one brother, and he's 2 years older than I am, and uh, when we go out, we would go fishing. We loved to fish and camp, and we'd go camping. And so my father would drive, and we would go out up to Wisconsin and to the Dells and all those places, and we would fish and camp and have fun. Well, we would have a tent, and we'd pitch a tent, and we'd stay all night. And then some nights it would rain, and and it would be nasty, and other times it would be very nice. But we would fish. We loved to fish, and we always fished, and then we'd catch them, and then we'd eat them, and perch, we'd catch perch. So then when I was young, we would go to a place in Michigan where they sold perch, and we would they would serve perch, and we would go there to eat perch because we loved perch so much. That was really nice, fun.
Yeah.
And we took a lot of trips, just the four of us, and then we took several trips where my grandmother was with me, my my father's mother, and so we had a good time. We always had a good time. My mother's mother was born in Norway, and her name was Mary, and she lived to be 89 years old, and my mother lived to be 95 and a half. So I have good whatever you call it, I forget. Good genes, yeah. My father's mother was born in Virginia, and she's the one that traveled with us, So she lived over in Virginia. So we didn't see them very much until later when they moved, to Illinois, and so. And then my his father, he worked downtown, and he worked in a place where they sold things to make clothes with. And so he would bring different kinds of silk home and stuff, and then my mother would make little dresses for me out of the silk, and so that's what. And he was so nice, and he would every time he would come to visit us, because I loved caramels. I loved caramels, and every time he'd come to visit us, he'd bring me a box of caramels. So it was very good. His name was George. George Scott. George Scott. And my grandmother's name was Laura. Laura Scott. And they both lived in Chicago. Yeah, yeah. Later, you know.
Later.
Yeah, they finally got married, and then one of my grandfather's sister, she had a place up in Evanston in Chicago. Great big house with a porch all the way around. And I remember when I was a little girl, we used to go and and stay at her place uh, because it was so nice, you know. So that was what I would do. So uh, that's that part of the story. And like I said, my grandmother, my mother's mother, was born in Norway, and she came over when she was about 15. And then she met my grandfather, and then they got married, and they had 7 kids. So I had a lot of cousins, and uh, then I'm trying to think of what I should say. Oh, my grandmother uh, used to read a lot, and she loved uh, the church. The funny part of it was, she was a Catholic when she was small. Uh, she was a Catholic, and she went to school, and the teachers slapped her, you know, because she did something wrong. And she said, "I'm not going back to that school again." So she never went back, and then she turned Lutheran, you know. And she used to go to Lutheran church with me when she got older. My mother had a store, and she sold hats, and she made hats and sold them, and dresses. And I would help her out in the store. And then next to the store was a show, and I used to go to the show every Saturday. And then we would see the show. It was only 10 cents then to go to the show. And I'd go to the show, and then after the show, we could go up and sing or dance or whatever we would do, and then they would give prizes. So I used to go up and I would dance the Charleston, and I used to get a box of candy. So that was fun, yeah. Like I said, my father was he was a salesman for Wonder Bread, and he had so many stores under him, and he he was he was he wasn't a he didn't do much. My mother was the one that she fixed everything. My mother did everything. She was wonderful. She was so smart that if a lamp would break, she would fix it, you know. But he never did anything like that. He wasn't that kind of a man. He just worked, and that he would come home, and like people now, like the people downstairs of us, they wanted they wanted some what you call it, Wonder Bread, the Twinkies and all that, and so they made him. They made. They said, we'll do something for you if you give us some Twinkies and some Hostess cupcakes. So he said, well, fine. What will you do for me? So they said, we'll build you a bookcase. So this man built us a bookcase, and I had it for many, many years, and gave it to us. And then my dad gave him all kinds of things to eat, you know. So, but he He didn't do any sports or anything. He was just kind of a very quiet man. She was wonderful, just wonderful. She would, she was very good with the kids, you know. In fact, my daughter, when my father died, my daughter, my second daughter, was only 5 years old. So my mother said to me when my father died, she said, "I want to come and live with you." And I said, "Oh, fine." But we had to buy another house because we needed another bedroom. So we bought a bigger house, and she came to live with me, and she took care of my daughter. It was really a blessing to me because we played golf all the time. We belonged to the country club, and she would stay home and take care of Patty. And my mother made all her own clothes. She knit and she sewed, and she made pillows. You know, she sewed all my pillows in my house, which she made. And so she taught my daughter how to do all this, and it was wonderful because she was my babysitter. You know, so we were very lucky to have her, and she lived with us for 12 years. She fixed everything, and she painted. And she worked for a studio in Chicago that sold to Marshall Fields. So she painted all these plates and vases and stuff, uh, uh, and they sold them. But she was wonderful about painting china. And then she started painting pictures, and she painted all the pictures in my house, and she even sold some of the pictures too. And then she made jewelry. She bought a kiln. She had her own kiln, and she would buy clay, and she would make jewelry, all different kinds of flowers and stuff, and she'd make them out of the clay, and then she would fire them, and then she would paint them, and then she would fire them again, and then she would sell them. And I still have little cards that with her name on, saying for the jewelry, you know. And I have all kinds of those things right now, you know, that I wear, that my mother made. And she just did everything. Then she would take like she took some celery, and she put it like this, and she would put different colors of paint on it, and she would paint it, and then she would make it into a picture, you know, and she did all that kind of stuff. She was just so smart. We used to move a lot because my mother, they never owned a house. They always had apartments. So we'd move a lot. Maybe every couple years we'd move to a different apartment. In the same town, yeah, in Chicago. Yeah, yeah, I was born in Chicago. And then we moved further north, and then we rented a house, and we were in this house for quite a while, and my aunt used to raise collie dogs, and so they gave us a collie dog, and it was a beautiful dog, and we just loved it, and it was a show dog. And then we were in this house for a long time, and then all of a sudden we decided there was bees buzzing around, and here there was a bee colony inside the fireplace, and so we called a bee maker, and he came in, and he took out all these bees, and we got I don't know how many pounds of honey that were up in there. So that was kind of interesting. But then we moved away from that house, yeah. So we just kept moving, and then finally my we moved to a place where I met my husband. You know, I used to date all the different kinds of guys, and I went with one guy who was a Catholic. He was John Ryan, his name was, and I went with him for about 4 or 5 years, and then I went to a party where a lot of my friends worked. They all got together, and one of them asked me to go to this party, and I went to that party, and that's where I met my husband. And then we went out, and we used to go horseback riding and everything, and play golf. He was a golfer, so he was trying to teach me to play golf. But I have double jointed arms, and they just turn around, and he said, "I don't know which way you're going." So, but I did play golf, but I wasn't real good at it. But I did play a lot, and I became head of the women in the 9-hole group. So, and I got prizes for them and whatnot. We traveled. We traveled. My husband was with the Greyhound Corporation, and they had a travel agency, and so we'd get preference, you know, because he was the controller of the company. So we went to see the Christmas Day parade in California, you know. On New Year's Day we went on there, and that was good. And then we just went everywhere. We went all over the world. We went to 60 different countries. So, he didn't go to 60 different countries. I did. He probably went to about 50, and then after he died, I took my kids with me. I kept traveling, so I went to 60 different countries altogether. Wow. Yeah. Wow. So, and I went on 15 cruises. So that's what we did. We went on cruises together too. My husband loved to cruise, and we went all over. And we went to Africa on the safari, and Kenya, and that was wonderful. We just loved that safari. And we went up in a hot air balloon. It was our 40th wedding anniversary, and we went up in a hot air balloon, and we traveled all over Kenya, and then we landed right in the bush, and we had there was some other people another couple from Greyhound was with us, and we landed in the bush, and we had a champagne breakfast in the bush for our 40th wedding anniversary. And then we got in the truck, and then they took us back, you know, to where we were going. So that was the best trip that I loved of all the trips I went. Yeah. When my husband was going to retire, then I decided that I didn't want to have my husband home and her home at the same time. So we had this big house here in Arizona. We had a 3,000 square foot house with 41 fruit trees. 41 fruit trees. And they used to come and pick them in those days. They'd pick them and they'd give you, they'd pick them in a big box like this. And they'd give you $7 for this great big box of grapefruit. But now, when they come to pick them, you have to pay them to pick them. It's different, you know, because years ago that was different. So anyway, we furnished a house for my mother in Sun City. So she had some friends of hers that lived in Sun City. So and then she went to Sun City, and she lived in Sun City. And then my brother and his wife, they moved to Sun City. And they used to visit back and forth all the time. And then we decided that we were going to move to Sun City too. And we could play golf and whatnot. So we bought a house out in Sun City, went on the golf course. It had a pool and everything. And so we were going to move in there because we had bought some property down in Florida on Marco Island years before, and we thought that's where we were going to move when we retired. So we bought this house. So then we sold that property in Florida, and we had two houses, one here and one there. And we just go out there and clean it up and whatnot. And then my husband said, "Oh, we wanted to sell this house here, and we didn't get a buyer. So he said, we'll put them both up, and whichever one sells first, that's where we'll go." So he put them both up, and of course the one in Sun City sold first. So we stayed here. So we gave up that nice house in Sun City. So we stayed here, and that's where we finally ended up, right here. When I was a little girl, I wanted to go to church, and my parents didn't go to church. So we lived close to a Swedish Lutheran church. And so I went over there, and I told them that I wanted to go to Sunday school class, you know. So I went to a Sunday school class, and I stayed there, and I made a lot of friends there, and what's the word? When you get confirmed, I got confirmed there. And then I stayed there all the time. I went to that church, yeah. And then later on, when I got with my husband, met my husband and whatnot, then I was going to go to another church, but then I decided that I'd like to stay with that church, even though it wasn't near me anymore. So I went to that church when I got married. It was a Swedish Lutheran church, and my husband was German, and they belonged to the German side of the church, you know. So they went to the German church, and I went to the Lutheran church, the Swedish church, and Swedish Lutheran. And they always used to kid me about when they'd come, they'd listen to it because they would talk in like a feed of food, a lot of food, you know, like that. I loved God. I loved God from the very beginning. Um, I used to think about God, you know, and whatnot. And I thought, well, I really should be going to church. So, and like I told you about my mother, you know, she was supposed to be Catholic, and then she broke away from the church. So that's why she didn't go. But then they came to course to my confirmation and whatnot. And then, but she still didn't go to church unless I took her, you know. And then when I moved here and she was with me, then she joined the church. So then she became a Lutheran too. Yeah. Talk to him all the time. I'm always thanking him. Always thanking him. Thank you, God, for this. Thank you, God, for that. Because he's so good to me. And I just feel that I am so fortunate to be a person that God helps me all the time. So if I need something, I ask. You don't always get it, but if he does want you to get it, you'll get it eventually. So, you know, I do something now that a lot of the people don't say is right or want to do that. But I watch Joel Osteen. I like him. I think he has a good message. So I watch him every Sunday morning before I go to church. He's on at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I watch him, and then I watch another program, and then I go to church, you know. So I'm at church 3 times in the morning, every Sunday morning. I just love my church. I always have, and I always will. And my husband was good too. We both loved the church. And we took our kids to church, and I always taught Sunday school. And I just felt that God was so good to me that I had to do something for the church. So I try to give enough money to the church too, because I just feel that that's what God wants me to do. Yeah. So, and I have told my financial advisor how much I want to give the church when I'm die, you know. So they'll get a lot of money out of that too, because I just feel he's so good to me that I should pay him back. It's his money anyway. Her name was Carol, but when she was little, when I would carry her around and walk through the kitchen, she'd say, "Cookie, Cookie." She wanted a cookie all the time. So I said, you know, I think I'm going to call you Cookie. So she's been Cookie ever since then. Cookie and Norm, my son, we took him on a trip. We flew to Minnesota, someplace, and then we went by plane up into Canada, and we fished in Canada, and we fished these big, giant pike. They were this big. I have pictures of them, and we brought them home, and then we would take and cut them up and give them to everybody, you know. But we used to fish like that. I've always loved to fish, and my husband loved to fish too, and my son fishes too. Yeah, he likes it. Yeah. Norm and Cookie were born in Chicago, and then Patty was born too, but she was born when we moved to Palos Park, because she was 12 and a half years after the other kids, you know. So that was a surprise party, and she was like I said, my mother was living with us then when Patty was born, and then no, she wasn't living with us when she was born. She was living. She came to live with us when Patty was 5 years old. So, but we had I had the 3 kids, and we had a nice house out in Palos Park, and so my Norm used to play a little league ball, and he was very good. He was a smart kid. They all were very smart, and he went to. He was smart when he was in school, but he played a lot of ball and stuff. You know, he was an athlete, and then he went to Ripon College in Wisconsin, and he got a scholarship, and so he graduated from there, and then from there he went to Kansas State College, I guess, and then that's where he got his doctorate in chemistry. And while he was there, he met my daughter-in-law, Cherie, and she came from down in Illinois, down further in Illinois, and she was working for her doctorate in chemistry also, but she didn't get it. She just got a master's, and he got a doctorate. And while they were there, then they got married, and then they had my little granddaughter, Christine, and so he graduated from college, from getting his doctorate. He was hired by I can never remember the name of it. It's from Wilmington. What? DuPont. Yeah, that's where he was hired, by DuPont. And then he worked in the chemistry, what you call it. And then after he worked in the chemistry thing, he was so good at that, they decided they'd make him a guy that would go out, and if anybody had any problems, he would troubleshoot her. He would fix the problems, which he did. So he worked with that for a long time, until one of the people that he went to help, they asked him if he could come and work for them. So he came and worked for them he had a big job on there, and that's where he worked for a long, long time. And then he met somebody else, and then they asked him to be where they go out and troubleshoot, you know. So that's what he did. He went out and he was always helping people with their chemistry, you know. And so that's what he did, and he did it until he finally retired. And so now he's retired. And he just was 71 day before yesterday. So he was born 3 days before Pearl Harbor. So, and then Carol, she went to she went to school in Palos Heights, and after she graduated, then she went to school down in Missouri. She went to Missouri Lucier Teachers College, and she became a teacher. And then she went back to school, and she got a job where she used to her school that she went to. And then everybody called her, you know, because everybody knew her, you know. So she worked in that school for a long time. And then when she got married, then she didn't do it for a long time. But then she decided she wanted to teach, so she substitutes, and she does that now. She's still substituting. So she was very smart too. And then Patty was the same way. When she was in school, she was always the smartest one. She's always the smartest one in the class. So the teacher used to call me and tell me how wonderful she was. So then when we moved to Arizona, she was just going into high school. And so she graduated from Scottsdale High School, the last graduation, you know, they had there. So from there, from the Scottsdale High School, then she went to out in teachers college. Why can't I think of it? It's from the church. You know, they went out in California. Cal Lutheran, yeah, that's where she went. And several of her friends all went there too, because I used to go to our church, and they had a group that palled around together. So a bunch of them all went out there, and Cal Lutheran. And she graduated there. She was she led the thing going in, you know, and she graduated summa cum laude. Yeah, she was smart. Yeah, she was smart. And she met her husband there. He lived in Colorado, and so he went there. And she was the editor of the paper. And then she met him because he was helping with it. He was younger than she was. He hadn't been there that long. So they both worked on the paper. And then they started to go out together. And then they decided to get married. So they came to Arizona. They were married here in Prince of Peace Church. And she had a very big wedding. And she had 12 bridesmaids. And all her old friends, you know. It was very nice. They mean everything to me. I just love them all, and they all love me, and they're all so good to me. The joys of my life is having a wonderful mother and a father, having great grandparents, and finding a wonderful husband. And my 3 children are a blessing to me. My 3 children. And now all my grandchildren are a blessing to me. And my great-grandchildren are a blessing to me. So I'm just so happy with my life. And I'm happy that I'm here in this place because everybody is so nice. And they all treat you very nicely. And I try to be nice to them too. And I've had a lot of parties for all these people here. So they're a blessing to me too. So all in all, I'm just blessed.